Thanks, Isabel. Okay, so I will be discussing how the Industrial Revolution impacted all of the economic classes in America. Okay, so many people were not impressed with the Industrial Revolution because they were more interested in the cheap land out west. So a lot of people were drawn to the cheap land in the west than working in the factories. So the factories decided to employ young farm women, and this was started in Lowell, Massachusetts. They were the first textile company to employ young farm women, and then that set the precedent for ending up using child labor. So children as young as 7 went to go work for minimum wage in the factories. So the middle and upper class benefited a lot because they could already afford goods without factories, but since it's mass produced, the price is lowered, so they could get stuff cheaper and have more money be saved at their expense. Also, these people were businessmen and professionals, so as the factories boomed, they grew more and more powerful because they had more of a influence from an industrial standpoint on the nation since they were professionals. Those in the working class had a combination of benefits and drawbacks. The working class, they were able to, of course, get jobs, so that was the only positive. First of all, women and children got paid less than men did, so that's a gender pay gap right there, so that was one of the disadvantages. And also the factories were very overcrowded. They worked long working hours and poor conditions. And many workers were susceptible to disease because of all the grossness of the factories. And many people, majority of the working class, lived close to the factories for a convenient commute. And they were also susceptible to carbon dioxide, which isn't healthy. And also the artisans and the skilled workers were impacted the most because they had to shut down their personal businesses because those same goods that they were producing handmade were being mass produced and sold for cheap in factories. So they had to shut down their personal businesses and go over there to work in the factories. And yeah.
Sage. Sage.
Okay, now we're going to be talking about how the Industrial Revolution affected other revolutions. So the Industrial Revolution led to many inventions. Some include the telephone, sewing machine, light bulb, and the combustible engine. And goods that had once been crafted by hand started to be produced in mass quantities in factories. And new machines helped to do this, and some of these new machines were the cotton gin, for example. And the cotton gin made it to where it was easier to separate cotton from the seed, and this led to the increase in
Wait a minute! Who are you?
need for factory workers. And starting in the mid-18th century, innovations like the flying shuttle and the spinning jenny, and the water frame, and the power loom. Starting in the mid-18th century, innovations like the flying shuttle, the spinning jenny, the water frame, and the power loom made weaving cloth and spinning yarn and thread much easier. And producing cloth became faster and required less time and far less human labor. The farmers made a better living working in factories than actual farming. Kind of sad. And as workers left their farms to work in factories for higher wages, it led to a shortage of food being produced, which not very good. And the sharp increase in the number of factories led to an increase in urban population. And the population wasn't contained to the factories as people flocked to the cities, where the living conditions were decreasing and getting a lot worse because the urban resources were being overwhelmed because there wasn't enough of them. And sewage flowed in the streets in some cities because manufacturers dumped waste from the factories into the rivers, and water became sewage flowed in the streets in some cities while manufacturers dumped waste from factories into rivers. And as a result, the water that they had was not clean, and it led to laws and regulations for clean water because people started to get sick because, you know, clean water is kind of essential. And the production efficiently improved during the Industrial Revolutions with inventions such as the steam engine. The steam engine dramatically reduced the time it took to manufacture products, and more efficient products led to reduced prices for products.
Thank you, Sage. And now to the Industrial Revolution in comparison to the map of the U.S. and how it affected it. The westward expansion, people saw it as an opportunity and even a new start to have their own land. Cheap land and easy credit was received by farmers. The government tried to encourage them to move towards the west and gain land and commercial enterprise, and large pieces of land were sold cheaply to farmers. Banks also provided farmers with low interest rates. New transportation such as railroads and canals stretched to the west, encouraging migration to the new territories. New economically booming cities emerged in the west and other areas as a result of the Industrial Revolution, which was mainly centered around the northeast, but it gradually expanded to new territory in the south, and the states began to be connected in a whole new way. Some small cities such as Cleveland, Cincinnati, Detroit, and Chicago became commercial centers of expanding economy. These cities served as transfer points, which allowed them to distribute manufactured goods. As a result, thousands of immigrants entered the U.S. The increase in population, though, through increased birth rate and immigration, which also increased the need for more land and settlement in the western territories. Population from 1800 to 1860 went from around 1 million to 4 million. Population increase also led to slave increase, which eventually led to more and more farmers moving west in order to gain more land and be more successful in their careers. Now over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Maddie. Now moving on to important people. George Stephenson developed the first steam-powered locomotive. Richard Arkwright invented the water frame used for water spinning. Jethro Tull invented the seed drill, deposited seeds in rows, and therefore was less wasteful. Important inventions include the spinning jenny, created by James Hargreaves in 1764. This machine allowed workers to spin more wool at one time, greatly increasing productivity. This invention was necessary for the industrialization of the textile industry. James Watts created the first truly reliable steam engine in 1775. Another, less efficient model had been developed in the 1600s. Watt's version included a crankshaft and gears in the foundation for modern steam engines. This invention made locomotives, as many of the textile machines, more possible. Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin in 1794. Prior to the invention of the cotton gin, cotton seeds had to be removed from the cotton by fiber. This invention made a cotton much more profitable crop for farmers. Samuel F.B. Morse invented the telegraph in 1836. This invention changed the face of communication. Instant communication became possible between the East and West Coast and allowed people to know what was happening almost as it happened. This would revolutionize media and personal communication. More important terms of the Industrial Revolution are enclosures, which are one of the fence-in or hedge-in fields created by wealthy British landowners on land that was formerly worked on by village farmers. Another term is crop rotation, which was the practice of rotating crops of different fields from crop to crop each year to avoid exhausting the soil. Industrialization, which was the process of developing machine production of goods. Factors of production were land, labor, and capital, the three groups of resources that are used to make all goods and services. And another term would be road transportation, which was in the early 1800s, John McAdam improved roads with a special design that allowed them to drain so heavy wagons that they would not sink in the mud. Another term would be when private investors created roads and made people pay to ride on them, and these were called turnpikes or turnstiles. Imperialism was the policy of extending one's country's rule over many other lands. This was born out of the cycle of industrialization and the need for resources and new markets. Another term is socialism, which is a new economic system where the factors of production are owned by the public and operate for welfare of all. Government should plan the economy rather than depend on free market capitalism to do the job. They wanted government control over factories, mines, railroads, and to end poverty and promote equality.